Okay, we're back. If those people, thank you. I wanted to reset and make sure that everyone who wanted to be on tonight's live can join us today. Hi, this is Shakita Battle, and I am your host for this evening. The title uh, of our 3 day challenge, day three of our 3 day challenge is the roadmap to confident success. Tonight, we're going to focus on closing the gap and and consistency and results. So thank you again. This is Shakita Battle. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'm seeing people in the chat now. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is day three, roadmap to confidence, workforce confidence. Okay, so I thank you so much for everyone who's joining today. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we could go ahead and get started. I am Shakita Battle, your leadership strategist. I am the mother of two amazing girls, and we have been doing entrepreneurship for decades now, and now we have budding entrepreneurs. My youngest daughter started a cookie company. She had allergies when she was very little, and her and I would always make uh, egg-free treats. And one day she asked her father, could they start a business together? And that's all she wrote. And I just cheer them on. So we are a family of entrepreneurs. And for myself, I am a leadership strategist. I help companies uh, with their strategy and individuals start their businesses. Okay. So I am super excited. We've learned a lot. On day one, we talked about confidence. We defined it. I gave you the definition for it, and I talked about what blocks confidence. Right? We talked about how confidence is not a personality. Confidence is your internal narrative. Has everything to do with your internal narrative. We also spoke about myths on day two. Day two, we talked about why traditional advice doesn't work. Traditional advice always talk about the behavior. If you do this, then this will happen for you. If you do that, then you'll see better leadership. But real leadership starts within, just like confidence. That internal narrative, we talked about how it could keep you back, how you're really able to do more. You've grown into a different person than you were a year ago or 2 years ago, but you haven't given yourself permission to be the person that you actually have always dreamed to be. So you need to give yourself that permission. So what we're talking about tonight is how we create a strategic plan to close that gap from what you used to be to the person you dreamed of becoming. Okay? So are you ready? Honest, are you ready to take the next step to where you want to be, to your dream self? Okay? Honest. I'm not talking about dream self in we're going to live in fantasy. No. Remember, anything that's built and built to last needs to be built on truth, on reality. All right. Okay. So since we're ready, let me go ahead and let's get started. Okay. Success is never an accident. It's always intentional. So for the past 2 days, we've been building on the awareness of what are the struggles that we're dealing with inside. We talked about that. Now, confidence doesn't grow just because the time passed by. It starts with awareness. It starts with knowing that you need to improve, but now you need a plan. You need something strong, because you can say, I'm aware of this. I'm walking into a new situation. And then pressures rise. Something happens, something someone says, or someone is present that you weren't prepared to be there, right? And then you start to feel uncomfortable or nervous. But we're going to start the process for the foundation. It does not automatically increase with your experience, but experience will help. The more you do these things, that the foundation, then the foundational steps that we're going to talk about tonight, the more you do these, the more natural it will become, and you'll be able to have your automatic back, you'll fall into it automatically. You'll fall into these steps of making sure you show up strong. You'll fall into these steps automatically because that's what we want you to consistently show up as a strong, confident person. So, years in the workforce and exposure to bigger responsibilities, it does help. But remember, it's all about you and how you control that internal narrative and give yourself permission to show up, right? So many people assume if they keep working hard, confidence will just click. But confidence is not accidental. It improves when you understand what is shaping it, what's working behind the scenes. When you know what drives your reactions, your decisions, and your hesitations, you can start adjusting them on purpose instead of hoping they will adjust by themselves. Think of it the same way you would think about a strategic plan. Results improve when there is clarity, when there is focus, and a repeatable process. Confidence works the same way. It requires awareness, consistent effort, and a system you can return to when pressure rises. See, the goal today is not to motivate you temporarily. It is to give you a clear roadmap you can continue using long after this challenge is over. See, inspiration may fade, and structure, if it's there, it'll keep you grounded in a tough situation. Sustainable confidence is not built on personality or charisma or even on natural boldness. You can be bold and courageous, but confidence, you can still have a low, some areas that you're struggling with your confidence. See, but confidence, it rests on three core pillars. It's three key pillars that will affect if you show up strong. All right, you ready for this? These three pillars, if one of them is weak, it'll affect the way you show up. So all three of them need to be worked on at the same time. Remember, we're talking about the roadmap. I'm giving it to you now. You need to work on your self-concept, self-regulation, and self-leadership. Now, we talked about self-concept. We talked about identity a lot yesterday on day 2. Self-concept is the way you see yourself. If you still see yourself at 5 years or see yourself as that person who you were 10 years ago, then it's hard for you to close the gap without giving yourself permission to be that person who's fully capable of doing whatever it is that you want to walk into, right? You feel like something's holding you back. That was number 2, right? That was what is holding you back. That's why we're here today. We're trying to get rid of the things that's holding us back. So sometimes our identity is stuck somewhere else, or another person's narrative of who we are is still placed on us, and it needs to be removed. We're not that person they say we are anymore. Maybe we used to be that, but we're not that person anymore. And you know how you may say to somebody, you don't know who you messing with. I used to. Yep, that's right. You used to. But right now, something should be grounding you so that you don't return to that person. Let me give you an example. When my daughter entered preschool, it was in the suburbs. And like for 1 year of my life, only one, I lived in, I went to school in in an urban area in the city, and it was in the city of South Carolina. I'm telling you, that's not really, I mean, that's not like New York City or anything like that. But still, a city life is city life. It's not country life. And suburbia is suburbia, right? I mean, in Maryland, we live in Maryland, and suburbia America is so different than urban, than the urban anywhere to me, the inner city. So when I took my daughter to school, to her preschool, some kids were, some little boys attacked my daughter, and they held her down. That already, my daughter does not like to be held down. So that's probably one reason, because then one of the kids scratched her near her eye. And I got, I mean, I was upset. I wanted answers. So I approached the principal, and I asked the principal, how could this happen? It's only what, 8 or 10 preschoolers in this program, and you have 2 teachers. How is how is it that I mean, in this little teeny square perimeter in which they play, no one was watching and supervising the children? And when they couldn't give me an answer, I did say this. I said, I'm trying not to be urban right now. I said urban. And the lady laughed. She smiled. She knew what I was meaning, because the person I used to be, I felt like I wasn't giving myself permission to be the new me yet. I was still transitioning and catching up with this new me. Had nothing to do with vicinity. It had everything to do with who I define I will become, right? Who I say I am, not who you say I am, because I can still show strength. The same strength I learned in those urban settings. I remember telling you about going to the new school and choosing. And then that was the new school. It was very difficult, but I had integrity. I had dignity, and they gave me a choice. Do what the bullies say or just have no friends. And I chose not to have friends. I mean, honest. I'm being honest with you right now about what kind of person I am. If it's just to please you, and then I could have your favor and everyone else's favor, but I give up a piece of myself. I have to lose a piece of me in order to be accepted by you. Then I know that you're not my people. I have to let you go. Yes, I'll love to get to know you. I think we could truly learn a lot together in this classroom. But if it's limited, if it's only on the premise that I have to lose a piece of myself, then I'm sorry. You all could go ahead and keep it. All right? Because I want to show up as me. I learn best as myself. I function best as myself. You know, I'm willing to learn from everyone here, but not at the cost of losing what's most important, right? So I always thought about what's your I mean, I always thought about my priorities. And my daughter, at that moment, I was like, my daughter is my priority. And so I had to think about other tools besides chewing people out and doing whatever, screaming, hollering. No, I can do that. But I thought that strategically right now, I'm going to have an investigation done. I want the after the investigation, we will go over the results. But until then, this is an unsafe situation and my daughter's not returning. If you have anything to say about that, sure, we could talk about it. But I'm sure you understand my true concerns here. This is how I placed it for them. And they understood. And until the investigation was complete, sure, I was homeschooling my children before that program started. I was just giving my daughter exposure to a different audience. But until then, until that investigation is complete, I felt she was safer with me. All right. So that's what I mean when I say I used to be. Yes. So we need to make a plan. And I'm telling you about the 3 pillars upon which the roadmap is built. You work on your self concept, you work on self regulation. Again, self regulation. I don't think we went over this in day 1 and day 2. Self regulation is how you calm yourself, how you manage your own emotions, right? Regulation means to keep it when things get hot, when the valve is, oh, I'm going to explode, pressure is there. You release the pressure. How do you safely release the pressure so that you do not explode? How do you safely let it go? That's called self-regulation so that there is no explosion. You're managing it. I'm not telling you to pretend it's not there. That's not what we do here. We on this side, in this space, what I teach you is about reality, functioning in reality. But we talked about in day 1, when you can name your emotion, when you can name it, when you can identify what it is that you're feeling, then I told you how that moves everything from the survival mode, from fight or flight, to the processing mode of your brain, right? You begin to process it in the frontal lobe. We talked about how that's cognitive, right? That cognitive adjustment. So the old you, yes, that's normal. When you're a child and you haven't learned those techniques, it is normal for you to be in fight or flight, for that part of your brain to be functioning. But now you're an adult and you could process things totally differently. You see the world differently. You see a bigger picture. Sometimes it's hard for children to do that. But as an adult, in the workforce, at your workplace, you have to self regulate. And you've already learned how to do that. You already have all these skills. Now you need to give yourself permission to walk in that. All of that is yours. So, self regulation is pillar number 2, and pillar number 3 is self leadership. And that's when you continue, for me, to give, if okay, and that's what I'm going to do right now, give you my definition of self leadership. Self leadership is just being a lifelong learner. There are a lot, there is so much information that we will always, will gain insight, we'll gain knowledge, we'll gain information, but self leadership is the wisdom and how you apply that information, that new information, right? Because some of this, even what I'm saying for me, it's different on how you're going to implement it in your own life. Your life is unique to you. You are given, when we talked about identity yesterday, I said I might be salty. And then I might have a friend who's fiery red hot. Okay? But that's my friend. And I wouldn't want to change her. These pillars are still important in her life or his life. They're important in my life, but still it won't change how red hot my friend is, right? And it won't change my saltiness. All right. So the point is, we all bring something different. We're not to look alike. So self leadership is how you apply all the things you've learned. to become the best version of yourself. There's no fake it till you make it here. Remember, when you're faking it till you make it, you divide yourself. You're dividing your energies and you're trying to manipulate how other people see you. You're trying to control that. But no, that is not our aim here. Remember, we stand on reality. So our aim here is just to control how we see ourselves and how we show up every day. All right. So these are the 3 pillars important to your roadmap for workforce confidence. These pillars work together to support how you show up every day. And when they are strong and aligned, confidence feels natural and steady and strong. You consistently make your presence felt. Okay? Consistently show up for yourself, and you show up grounded rather feeling fake and forced. However, if even one of these pillars is undeveloped or underdeveloped, then your confidence begins to feel unpredictable. You may feel capable in one setting and suddenly unsure about yourself in another. You might perform well under low pressure, but when the pressure rises and things get hard, then you may not show up as strong. It can feel confusing, okay? Because your skills have not disappeared. You still have all your skills. It's just showing up, how you show up. That, you're like, how can I continue to show up strong? Your skills are there to still show up strong. It's just we need to work on the 3 pillars so that you could show up consistently that same way. So the difference is not in your talent. Is in whether these 3 pillars are strengthened. When the pillars are out of sync, confidence waves, it wavers. And when they work together, then watch out, right? You're coming to show up and take care of business. These pillars are not fixed like personality traits, okay? They're not personality traits. There are things you really have to be conscious. There are 3 areas you have to consciously work on. They're not qualities. You either have it where you have it or you don't have it. They are areas of development. They're strengthened with awareness and practice. And many people mistakenly label themselves as naturally confident because they feel they're wired that way. Confidence is, again, those 3 pillars. There will always, when it comes to confidence, just think about it, to think about life, okay? There's going to be stressful situations. There's going to be time. They always share that you don't want to ever make a decision when you're really tired or angry, right? You want to be careful what you say, but this is where the natural confidence come in. I say some people say they have natural confidence, but we also talked about self-leadership and self-regulation, right? And so this, I don't feel like just because you could choose somebody out, that means you're confident. It doesn't mean that. I mean, you're confidently chewing them out and you mean what you say, but it's not a personality trait, okay? Humility, I shared on day 1. Humility is the key to successful leadership. Humility. So sometimes I actually can say all the words. I can say all the words, but I choose to stay quiet in that moment. You can't argue with an angry person. I believe we said that too on day 1. You can't argue with an angry person because they're still here in survival mode, fight and flight. They're not really there to reason with you at that moment. So when things are red hot, you might want to be calm so that it could at least regulate the environment. And it's not your responsibility to regulate them. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the only responsibility you have is to regulate yourself. Because if you go there with them, then you both are going to be adding fuel to the fire. And then one person's going to, you say something and then you're going to get angrier when they say what they have to say. And then it just gets more and more heated, right? So you're going to make sure that they are not taking you there with them. Let them stay there by themselves. So your silence isn't that you've resigned your strength. No, you still have that strength. You still have your power. You still control. In fact, you have all the power. In fact, at that moment, you hadn't given it away because you're not letting them manipulate you and steer you and your emotions where they are going. You stayed calm and you stayed clear-headed, right? Reserved. That's humility. That is a sign. That's one sign of humility, right? So I'm saying to you that just because you can yell, it doesn't mean that you have natural confidence. It's more than that. You want permanent, something strong and permanent. You don't want to always replay, did I do that right after the conversation? We did a self-diagnostic on day one. Remember that? And we talked about how we always, one area is that if we keep replaying, did I do that okay? Did I say that okay? We don't want to always do that. We want to make sure that we show up strong so we won't have to do that. We understand that we're going to stay calm. We're not going to give our power away, right? So you can still be strong because there are going to be times when raising your voice is necessary. You'll know when that is, right? You'll know. I'm not trying to tell you not be you. I'm telling you that self-regulation, self-leadership, and self-concept all work together in order for you to consistently show up strong. Am I making sense? Are there any questions? So when you use all of those, then you will show up consistently the same way when all three of the pillars are working together. Now, all right, no questions? Okay. Once you understand each pillar and that it needs attention, your growth becomes specific instead of frustrating. Instead of asking, um, why am I like this? I talked about identity and understanding who you are and thinking that you have a problem because of this identity gap, which makes you ask, why am I doing this? Or why am I like this? Why does this keep happening? You'll now know to go back to all the diagnostic questioning that we talked about. You'll go back to the foundation of what I talked about, how you see yourself. What is it that you need right now? You may need to take a time to evaluate the situation, and unwrap it like an onion, layers being removed. And I talked about one way a layer can be removed is through journaling, right? Or therapy, or anything like that could help you. I don't know what level of trauma anyone's been through, but if it's been trauma, of course, you're going to need some help, right? But if it's just basic day to day, you can do some things through journaling, right? So the shift is going to be when you focus on these areas, when you become intentionally, you're removing that self criticism and replacing the confusion with real direction and clarity. When you can identify what needs adjusting, you stop guessing and start building. And that clarity alone will help you move forward. Self concept. Now, let's talk about the pillars, and we're going to break each one down even more right now because this roadmap is just simple, right? You're like, it's just those three, that's the pillars, and then that's the roadmap. Well, I think that clarity is key for true application. I need to make sure that you truly understand how these apply to confidence, building that workforce confidence. Pillar number one, self concept. Self concept is the internal picture you carry about who you are. It is the story you tell yourself and your abilities. Are there any questions? First, I'm really getting into it, but okay, no questions. Let me move on. We're talking about the pillars. Okay. So I just took a break. All right. Are you truly sure you're ready, everyone? Okay, let's keep on going then. Pillar number one, self concept. Self concept is the internal picture you carry about yourself. It is the story you tell yourself about your abilities. It's the story you tell yourself even about your priorities and the place you are in life. That's it. Like, for instance, I graduated a few decades ago from college. And you ask yourself, is this where I dreamed I would be? When I graduated from college, did I see myself here at this moment? And I must tell you, I think all of my college peers ask themselves that. I know I ask myself that, and I'm sure all my college peers are asking themselves that right now, too. As we're rounding the corner, I'm like, wow, we have raised children and been there for our parents and our siblings and did life. And you just ask yourself, is this where I was going to be? And I think none of us dreamed we'd be where we are. I never dreamed I'd have the challenges that I'm currently facing. I never dreamed I'd even experience some of the things that I've experienced. I think that, like, for instance, I never was big on traveling. Since I grew up as a military child, honest, I just felt like I saw enough of the world before I was even 5 years old. That's how I felt. Because moving for me was traumatic, right? It was very traumatic. And I felt like seeing the world, if I can always return home, I think that it's fine and I'm open to that, but there is no place like home. Like, that's how I feel, right? So I just feel like, although I feel that way, I still have met so many amazing people. And I've done some amazing things. I've been a part of some amazing groups. My work has extended to touch people lives in such an amazing way. I never dreamed of that. When I went to school, I was going to be a lawyer and touch people this way, that way, and another. But I didn't know that my life would be like so focuses on one-on-one relationships. So many different one-on-one relationships. And I think that's where the question is, are we like your self-concept is the way you see your situation, right? So I see my situation through those lenses. Yesterday I told you I'm rich. So that's the way I see my situation. I see it through a richness that money cannot buy. And that's through the fellowship and the relationships that I have managed to build. And I'm very fortunate to have met so many wonderful people and done so many things. But if you look at it monetary wise, I might guess, I might second guess. Did I make all the right choices and decisions? My answer still is yes, because those relationships are invaluable. There's only one me and one them. And so that's why self concept has a place on how we see where we are, the place we are right now in the world. If your self concept has not expanded to match your actual growth, then you will continue operating from an older version of yourself. So if I didn't see the richness of my life right now and of the things that I've accomplished, even though I thought I'd have more monetarily, but I didn't see the relationships. What if I just thought about monetarily, right? And I still was being there in my mind thinking, if I don't have $1 million by now in my savings account, then I failed. Then I am still operating from that 22-year-old self concept of myself thinking, yes, at this point, I'm going to be this, that, and another, and I got to do it. That 22-year-old version of myself is still dictating what kind of life I should have. And that 22-year-old never experienced my experiences, the experiences I have experienced now. That person, if I let that version of me, that old version of me that was not married, that did not have children, that did not have the challenges that come naturally in life, then I would have always focused on the superficial dream or that superficial goal. And then I would have found myself at the end empty because I never gave myself a chance to openly receive all that life brought to me, all the gifts. So, self concept, you must understand, you have to give yourself that permission to change your mind, to change the way you see the world and your goals. So if your self concept has not expanded to match your actual growth, you'll continue to operate in an outdated version of yourself. You may have gained experience, skills, insight, but internally, you're still responding as if you're that less capable person. When that happens, your behavior reflects the outdated image rather than the current you with that capacity to lead, the current you with the capacity to show up strong consistently. Updating your self concept is not about pretending to be someone new. It's about allowing your internal narrative to accurately reflect who you have become. An identity gap forms when your ability has grown, but your self concept has not caught up. You've developed new skills and handled more responsibility. You've gained that experience you said you needed. But internally, you still be, you still see yourself through the old lens. That's the identity gap, right? Your abilities grew, but you still, like I said, you're seeing yourself through that. Old self, identity gap. Here, that's that word that we learned um last night in day 2. The old lens, shaping the past of the shaping from your past roles and responsibilities, past narratives affecting your current day, right? Not seeing yourself as who you really are. This does not mean something is wrong with you if you keep struggling, okay, with that. I'm coming back to it. I'm coming back to the struggle, the identity gap. It just means, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you because you can't break out of that cycle. No, you can't break out of the cycle. That first you must first understand that. You're not defined by your mistake. We said that, remember? You're not defined by your mistake. You can break out of the cycle. It simply means your internal view has to catch up with your current level. It means that you have to start accurately seeing yourself. Not smaller than you are, not seeing yourself as smaller than you are, not behind where you truly stand, but your behaviors begins to shift where you are owning, owning where you are today. You stop holding back and you stop second guessing decisions that you're fully capable of making. See, the shift feels natural because it's not about becoming someone else, it's about seeing yourself clearly. Okay, that was self concept. Now let's go on to pillar number 2, self regulation. Self regulation is your ability to manage your reactions in real time, your ability to manage your emotions in real time. Right now, if you're in a situation, you can like quickly process it as quick as you can anyway. I always say if you need a minute, take that minute. If you need 10 seconds, then take that 10 seconds. Don't think that always self-regulation is, if I don't do it automatically, then it's not natural and I'm going to look fake. I don't care how other people's perceiving or will perceive you taking that moment for yourself. Don't stress about how others are seeing you at that time. You need to worry about how you see yourself. Will you respect yourself? Will you respect yourself after this? Will you respect yourself after this? Okay? So it's about your reaction in real time. Every day you encounter moments that test you. Every day. Pressure to perform, disagreements in a meeting, unexpected, unsolicited feedback, high expectations from others on your job. They can't sell 10, but they want you to sell 10. They can't create 50 pages of a report in these few hours that they've given you, but they expect you to do 50 pages of a report. That's unrealistic sometimes expectations, and we still will do whatever we can to make it happen. At what cost, though? It's like with the bully, at what cost? So we need to evaluate again. You're thinking about in real time, how do I handle this challenge? I'm not going to throw it back in their face and say, "Are you kidding me? You think I'm a joke or somebody to play with?" No, I'm not going to do that. No. But give yourself that minute to pause. I remember one time I was working with a group of people on a committee for the schools, and it didn't it started out rough in that I asked about an initiative that was important to me, and I asked if they would join me in making it happen, and they said maybe. Let's first work on our thing, right? What we're doing. And I put a lot of time and energy in helping them with their thing. I was on board being a team player. And when everything was over, I went ahead and I addressed my initiative. And I addressed it in a way like with the certainty, like I know we're doing this. And my people, they said, who told you you could do this kind of attitude and approach? And I wanted to go there with them. I'm a grown woman. I'm an adult. First, why would anyone speak to me as if I'm a child? And number two, I brought this up to you and the committee and the group. And I asked, is this something we can do? And you said that it is possible. And when I saw that no one was taking initiative whatsoever, I took the initiative and I brought a plan to the table, a doable plan. So it worked out wonderfully in the end. We got citations from the governor and from our county councilman for the great work we were doing. But it took me first proofreading my response back to that person 3 times, deleting most of it to respond in a way that was uplifting, meaningful, and yet still powerful. It was my true voice. So I was able to still show up and show up consistently as a strong individual making a difference. So that's why I'm saying here you're faced with challenges, but self-regulation can affect if a great idea go forward or if it's killed in the beginning. You might have to, or you may need to proofread that 3 times. You may need to proofread that email 3 times before sending it out, because remember, it's about a bigger picture. Not about your anger, not about how you feel about yourself. It's about a bigger picture at this time. Without self-regulation, those immediate reactions can take control, right? Before you have time to think clearly, you're already doing something. That's why I say you may feel the urge to defend yourself because your heart rate is increasing. Your thoughts are going so fast, you want to react. Your body wants to react even to whatever this pressure is you're facing. You want to, but like I said, you want to react, but I'm going to tell you, when you get that urge to defend yourself, self-regulation means you give yourself permission to withdraw from the heat of the moment. Take a minute to process it if you need a minute. If you only need 10 seconds, take that 10 seconds. Because proving that you're right, when you first start trying to prove that you're right, you've already given your power away. I mean, that's not the point, proving that you're right. I always tell you from the very beginning and day one, you focus on the facts, right? You're going to just focus on the facts and just let that be what you're going to concentrate your conversation on. Not so much how you have to, deflect this and protect this. Yes. And I think that by focusing on the facts, then you're advocating for yourself that way. Then you're staying focused and being purposeful in the conversation. You're staying focused. right? So these reactions happen. You're going to have natural reactions, reactions that happen automatically. But you have to understand, in that stress, you have to tell yourself, I'm not going to automatically fall into this old version of myself. I'm going to process it. This is the new me. I'm going to process it. So without doing that, it's natural. It's natural to just try, it's natural to want to have these automatic responses. Without self-regulation, it's natural to fall back onto the heat of the moment reactions. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to sabotage our efforts before we can get started. You might interrupt, over explain, shut down. That's natural. If you don't have self-regulation methods in place, if you don't remember to take that breath, it's going to be natural to interrupt them while they're talking, over explain yourself and shut down. Respond with intensity. And then later you realize your reaction did not reflect your true capabilities. See, that's what I mean. So self-regulation creates space between what happens and how you respond. That space is where choice lives. It's where your power lives. So strong self-regulation allows you to pause instead of react. It gives you a moment to think, what is actually happening here? Rather than assuming the worst, it helps you separate feedback from identity so that you can hear information without feeling personally attacked. It allows you to view a challenge as just that, a problem that needs to be solved, rather than a threat to your competence. That shift alone of being able to process that will strengthen how strong you are, how strong your self-regulation skills are. Regulation does not mean suppressing your emotion or pretending that that didn't affect you. It means acknowledging what's real, acknowledging what you feel. All right? You don't want it to control you. You control it once you name it. Once you begin to name what you're feeling, again, remember, you're moving from the fight and flight part of your brain to the part that processes information, and you're ready, you're thinking more clearly so that you can control your next move, not the situation control, not the situation controlling your next move. You're controlling your next move. And when you can stay regulated under pressure, your confidence becomes more consistent. You are no longer at the mercy of every difficult person or every difficult situation. You respond in ways that support your long-term growth plan. You don't want to undermine all that you've been doing, all the work you've put in, right? You want to support that long-term goal. So that was pillar number 2, self-regulation. We're on pillar number 3 of the roadmap, right? Self-leadership. Self-leadership is the practice of choosing actions that reflect your true capacity. Choosing your actions is the process of you choosing your actions that support who you are, the strengths, your abilities, your talents. Yes, that's it. It's the practice of you choosing to make sure those things, those areas are highlighted, not your insecurities being highlighted, okay? Not your weaknesses being highlighted. Self-leadership is when you highlight your capabilities. Self-leadership is when you highlight your talents. Self-leadership is when you highlight your skills. It is not when you highlight insecurities or your weaknesses. It's not highlighting that. Okay? That's leadership, period. Leadership, period. The CEO's job is not about doing the things. And that's when people get lost. The CEO's job is to protect the brand of the business. You're protecting the brand. So, self-leadership, you need to protect your brand, your personal brand. So, there will always be moments when insecurity tries to speak first. And it may suggest that you stay quiet. If that's because your insecurity is speaking first, stay quiet, delaying a decision, putting your head in the sand, or avoid just you don't want to be wrong, so you just be quiet and avoid visibility that way, then that's your insecurity. That's not leadership. Because remember, I'll say it again, leadership is to protect the brand, right? Honest, it is to make sure that you protect and focus. You protect the focus, that the focus is always on your strengths, talents, abilities, and skills. It is not the focus on your it is not to focus on your insecurity. It is not to focus on the weaknesses. I'm not saying to not be aware of your insecurities. Awareness is very important. I'm not saying not to be aware of your weaknesses. That is very important. I'm saying the focus. Leadership is to focus on. That means you put your attention on it. It's not to pretend that weaknesses don't exist. They do. Okay? In a business, this has nothing to do with, I wouldn't do this for my personal life. I wouldn't do a SWOT analysis. Life is not business all the time. It's not business as always and business all the time. No, that's not reality. That's not real intimacy and growing together with community, right? It is not business all the time. We're people. We have weaknesses. We have strengths. We have things about us that's not perfect. Yes. But then we have things about us that just makes us unique and fun to be around. Sometimes someone may be a great listener, right? And then they add value that way to the relationship just because the conversations they go there, and it's just so meaningful. But in business, it's different, right? So self-leadership, then there that it's going to be a little bit different. I still won't do the SWOT analysis and sweats and self-leadership, but that's what I'm talking to you about in business, the SWOT analysis. In business, we do an analysis where we look at the business and we talk about the strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that they're facing so that we could come up with a strategic plan on how to make the business better, stronger, and more visible, right? We call that the SWOT analysis. Well, in personal leadership, we're not going to do a SWOT analysis. we're going to do just personal inventory. In that personal inventory, we may journal about our weaknesses, yes. But when we're out and dealing with other people, the weaknesses do not lead. The weaknesses are not to lead. When we are showing up at the workplace, our strengths are to lead us, right? Our talents should be leading us, our abilities. Okay, this is the focus. That third pillar, self-leadership. We're looking at leadership on a whole and then self-leadership, right? Understanding what leadership is and then what it means to personally lead ourselves. So you're choosing in self-leadership to act from, to perform from, to respond from your highest capability rather than from doubt, rather from fear, rather from your weaknesses. Now, this pillar turns your awareness of the low confidence into behaviors, right? You may understand your identity gap, and then you may recognize your limiting thoughts. You may recognize the negative internal narrative. But self-leadership is when that translates into movement, and it is the moment you decide that, no, I'm not going to lead from that negative narrative. I'm not going to start out or respond using that negative narrative. I change that narrative, and you decide the narrative you will use. Instead of saying, I can't do it, that thought came to your mind and you say, I can do this, right? So self-leadership is when you decide your behavior is going to match the new narrative. Yeah, you change your mind in self-leadership from the old narrative to using the new narrative in order to move forward using that new narrative. I decide to move forward using this new narrative about myself, or what I think about myself, what I believe about myself, what I know about myself. Because remember, you are truly, fully capable, but you have to know it, right? You know this. You know you could do it. It's just you haven't given yourself permission. That's what we've been talking about for 2 days. The identity gap is when you hadn't given yourself permission. So you recognize those limiting thoughts, but you translate them into movement, into a new movement with a new narrative. Based on that new narrative, you have this new movement. And then you trust yourself. That's right. You made that decision to move from a new narrative, and then you make that opportunity. You make that space where you just now trust yourself as you move forward in that, right? You trust your preparations. It's not about perfection. So if things don't turn out perfectly, don't think you made a mistake by trusting yourself. It's about giving yourself that space and grace to keep moving forward, to test out your new legs and to walk in your newness, right? To walk into that space that is yours. It is who you are, the person you've become. So at first, yes, maybe it's wobbly, but still give yourself that grace as you begin to walk in that new space. It's between you, who you know you are capable of being, and how you actually and who you actually give yourself permission to show up as. All right. So you're capable of being that winner. Have you given yourself permission to be that winner? Confidence strengthens through repeated actions. All right. It does not grow from one bold movement. It's not one thing and then you've done it. It's not about taking a gigantic step and then you're there and you don't have to move forward anymore. It grows from consistent steps. It grows from consistent movements in the right direction and in making decisions and moving forward. It reflects that you've given yourself is when everything starts to reflect that you've given yourself permission to walk in that space, to be who you are fully capable of being. And when your actions match that version of yourself, when your actions match that version, your mind begins to register that as proof. And that proof it gives your mind motivation. All right. So when you start doing things that align with who you are capable of being, fully capable, when you start doing things that align with that, then it registers as proof. All right. And then that helps in personal motivation. All right. So each aligned action builds evidence to yourself and to others, because sometimes some people will doubt you and have a negative narrative holding on to what you used to do and what you used to be. But evidence reinforces our beliefs. If you heard that you can't do it and then you made a mistake and you went back to thinking, oh, I can't do it, see, that was your evidence that you used, but you didn't give yourself a chance. So giving yourself a chance and then new evidence to support that you can, and belief, this new evidence supports the belief and strengthens your identity. And over time, those small, consistent choices, they begin to reshape how you see yourself, really see yourself. So you don't have to remind yourself you could do it and then you think about it and know you. In fact, you'll be like, I know I could do it. Oh, yes, because I got proof, right? I have proof. So what once felt uncomfortable begins to feel natural. What once required you to put in some effort, now it's like you do it strongly. You show up consistently. You show up ready. And this is how confidence, what we are talking about, how you confidence is strong. This is strong confidence. This is sustainable confidence. This is unwavering confidence. And the one thing I said earlier, I want you to remember is that wisdom is important because you're going to get a lot of information, but it's how you use the information, how you apply it to your life personally, that's going to make a difference. You're going to meet some situations, some challenges. And I'm just telling you, in order to overcome those challenges, you're going to need to know what quiet confidence is. A lot of people think being loud is confidence. Again, I said that earlier and I need to reiterate it now. Being loud is not always being confident. You need to project when you need to project. But there are times when you need to be quiet. And that wisdom, really only that kind of wisdom comes in confidence. When you are confident, you'll know you don't need to prove your strength. You don't need to prove how strong and how right you are. You can sit with it and be okay. And again, I told you earlier in our sessions, you need to be able to sit with discomfort and be okay. All right. So we're going to get to the last and final section of this roadmap, of building the roadmap. This section is how to break the loop. And behind every confident moment, something's happening internally, right? And I think you have to come with me. Let's transition. Okay. So we talked about the roadmap and the 3 pillars. But there's a little bit more you need to know when it comes to your strategic plan. All right. You need to know a little bit more when it comes to your strategic plan. Okay, let's get to that. Are there any questions before we go into this next section? Because we just unloaded a lot. A lot. It just feels like it was intense because it was so much that I was sharing with you. All right. I don't have any questions. Whew. Excuse me as I adjust my camera a little bit as we go into this last part. We're doing it. We're coming up with that roadmap. We're coming up with our strategic plan. You have to do the work. Let's get it going. Let's go into this last section. How we're making the plan work. Behind every confident moment, I told you there's an internal narrative. There's something happening inside. Whether you're aware of it or not, something's happening. And it didn't start with the actions. Remember, it started with our internal narrative in the beginning. So what I'm saying is like it's almost like a call and response happening inside of us, right? So we're responding emotionally to all the things around us. And then we need to make a decision or a challenge appears. We're triggered. The trigger itself is just something neutral, a simple situation. But we give that situation meaning. So I need to set this up for you so that this won't be so abstract. I'm talking about you giving a moment. I'm just saying you're running right now. I'm saying you're going to always run into moments that trigger us. That's what I'm saying, right? And I'm saying I'm setting it up where you now I'm telling you you're thinking about things, you have things happening on the inside of you, and then things are happening all around you, and then you still have feelings about that, and then you're triggered, right? But the trigger was nothing specific about you. It was the story you began to give that thing. You gave it a story. And in a split second, now your feelings are strong. And I got to explain to you that the way you interpreted the message or whatever triggered you, it was just the story behind the event. It is the story behind the moment, that the story you created. And it may not always be true. It's based on your experiences. See, we give things definition. We assign stories to the situation. So once the thought forms, it begins shaping how you see yourself in that situation. It begins to shape how you judge that person whom you are speaking to. If that thought suggests capability, then you'll see yourself as capable. I'm talking about if the new narrative's now able to step in, then you're able to do the things you have to do to regulate yourself and to work through the situation. If the thought suggests doubt, then you start to see yourself as inadequate, maybe. Maybe you wouldn't put that term to it. Your ego won't let you put inadequate. That's the feeling you're feeling. But honest, it might be a feeling of inadequacy. And self-perception influence how you'll respond. You either step forward or hold back, or you get aggressive, defensive. The action you take is a result of the narrative or the feedback that you put on that thing. And over time, that response pattern that you've allowed to happen over and over again, it becomes the lens in which you do things and see the moment. It becomes your new normal. That response pattern becomes a new normal. And the next time you enter into that situation, then you go back to that response pattern. And then because it's based on how you saw yourself in the beginning anyway. So if you're responding as if you're inadequate or from a feeling of inadequacy, then you're going to think, okay, this is how I respond all the time when I feel this feeling. So that's why I'm saying it's important for you to identify the story, identify your feeling, really identify the story you're giving to the trigger. Why did you assign that story to the trigger? You need to understand this, okay? Because this is very important. I'm going there. This is so new. This is so different. This is a different page. So I personally need to like shift. I need to make this shift in the presentation tonight. I need to make a real strong shift for you so that you're not there with the 3 pillars. Now we're here on forming new patterns. You have to come with me onto the next part, which is now putting things in place. Let's just act like this is a whole new live. And this is part 2 of day 3. So I'm going to have to keep doing it. Part 2 of day 3. Now, I'm giving you a second. Get it together. Ground yourself. We're talking about the story that you give to your triggers. Once the thought forms, it begins shaping how you see yourself. And if that thought, again, like I said, suggests that you are capable, then you'll respond as if you're capable. When the first thought is limiting, everything that follows will be affected as well. So if you feel you're capable, that first thought is that you're capable, then all your actions going to follow. Your response pattern is going to be I'm capable. But if it's negative, if it's limiting, then your response pattern is going to follow that too. Your behaviors going to follow that too. For example, if the thought is I'm not ready, I'm not ready to speak up, I'm not ready to make decisions level, I don't belong in this conversation. You're 18 years old. You're going to college and you don't feel like you can respond to this conversation about your future. I know you could do it. You're in the room. You have a seat at the table, and it's time you speak up and you advocate for yourself, right? So if you have a limiting thought, you may not speak up. You may not ask your parents to do it either because you know you're 18 and you should do it. So no one is really speaking. Your parents having to position or juxtapose and tell them on your behalf. But this is the time for you to advocate for yourself. It's time, right? So you may think, I don't belong here or in this conversation. This is a limiting. You're starting from that limiting thought. And you begin to see yourself even harsher because of that moment. You limit yourself even more because you felt like, see, look how I just messed that up. You begin to operate from a smaller version of yourself. Your voice may soften. You hesitate before you say anything. And you decide not to contribute, not to really contribute. And your actions look cautious and you feel like you're reflecting all of that fear, but really they don't know what you're thinking. These are the thoughts in your head. And when the outcome is smaller, it appears to confirm your original doubt. It's not exactly what you wanted, right? So now you feel like, see, I told you, I know what I'm talking about, but that's not true. It's smaller because you showed up smaller. Things could have turned out differently if you had spoken up, right? So you're not aware that you're just thinking, I couldn't do it. So the loop starts because you responded from a limiting thought, and then you felt it was confirmed because things turned out negative. So you continue to show up that way, quiet, hesitant, not speaking up, not saying what you really want to say. And then the mind then stores that experience as proof. And even though it started with a thought, it started with a thought that was never fully questioned, right? You just assumed, and then you said, yeah, that's what it is. And then you just keep it moving. However, when you pause and challenge your first thought, the direction of the loop can change. The direction of how your response pattern, you can change that. You can, honest, because that loop is what it's just a habit that your brain just starts to answer this way. This is the way you're going to show up every time. And you can break that pattern. You can break that habit. You break that loop. If instead you choose, I'm strong, I'm capable, I've handled situations like this before, then what you start to see about yourself, your self-perception, it starts to shift, it changes, and you begin to see yourself as capable, not as uncertain. This shift influences how you act, right? Because you see yourself as capable now. You don't see yourself as uncertain right now. You took that second, and now you're capable. You see it there. And you speak more clearly now because you know you're capable. You engage more directly now because you know you're capable. The results improve. Not because you forced the confidence, not because you forced anything, but because your internal interpretation changed. That internal narrative changed, that beginning thought changed. Over time, these small shifts build evidence, right? And the evidence strengthens your identity. This is how confidence grows more steadily, not from pretending, but from consistently choosing the thoughts that align or that reflect your true capacity, not the limiting, not the limiting thoughts. Don't choose those. Not the ones that limit you, not the ones that say you're not capable, but choosing the ones. It starts with you just choosing, not pretending. Again, we're not faking it. We're not pretending. We're choosing to believe the truth about our strengths. We're choosing to believe the truth about our abilities. We're choosing to believe the truth about our talents. All right? So how that first thought when you're triggered affects a pattern that starts to form in our brain on how we're going to handle situations like this. So when you build your plan, knowing this, knowing this, knowing I can do more, it's when you start to build that plan, everything's going to be strategic from here on, okay? It's it's another thing to clearly identify where you are. It's another thing where you're going to always think about, like, maybe at that time it's time for you to remember when you did more, right? You're going to remind yourself of those situations. If it's a challenge, especially in the beginning, because you're breaking that pattern of negative thinking or limiting thoughts, to break that pattern, you're going to have to always say, I've done this before, right? That's what I mean. You're going to refresh you just put some power, some gas behind it. So your growth is affected when you move from general frustration to understanding. Instead of feeling dissatisfied, you're able to pinpoint the exact moment where your behavior didn't match your ability. That's what I'm trying to get you to, right? And making your plan to begin to, because at first, when you start doing this, it's going to be difficult. I gave my interns, I'm working with a group of kids this summer, and their first assignment, one of their first assignments, is called inventory. And with this inventory, they're doing a personal inventory of their lives, of their day to day. I even said, please tell, maybe at that time, what are you thinking about? And if you can't do that, oh well, but just really put what you're doing at that moment, because I wanted them to become aware of a really task, that they're a physical task. I want them to become aware. Let's start with physical tasks, things that they could really see, feel, touch, smell, taste, whatever they're doing, eating, listening to someone, looking at TV, playing a game, whatever you're doing, put that down. I want you to express it. This is another level. This is a mental inventory. And it is no way we can do all the thoughts that's going through our mind, right? I mean, thousands of thoughts go through our mind. Thousands. But I'm just asking us to take a look at the thoughts that we at our thoughts when we start to respond to a trigger. What was the thought? Was it limiting, or was that we're capable? And looking at the bigger decisions that you're making, looking at those bigger moments, the macro moments, we're looking at that right now. And I think that that's what we want. We don't want to live things mechanically. We don't want to move mechanically. We don't want to be a machine. We just want to be the best version of ourselves. We're human. We're always growing. That's why wisdom comes into this training. That's where wisdom comes in. We need to know how to apply what we're learning, right? So I'm not asking you to become mechanical, but we're here because we want to find out what's holding us back. What's holding us back? And I'm just trying to get you to see that there's this internal narrative that we're not really conscious is playing over and over about limiting abilities, thinking that we can't do it because when we were 5, we couldn't. Yeah, that's true. But when we become adults, we're not that child anymore. We're not fully dependent on someone to feed us and to clothe us and to turn the doorknob, or to do the things that 5-year-olds can't reach. Right? We've grown. Our muscles are stronger. And we can do more. So most people sense there's a difference between what they're capable of and what sometimes they operate from. And you may know that you have the skill to do it. You have the skills to perform at a higher level. But notice that in certain settings, you still hold back. You may feel confident in one environment, but you hesitate in another. That difference is the gap you have to identify, the gap we've been addressing throughout this entire challenge. And it's not a flaw, it's simply the space between your potential and your patterns. So instead of judging the gap, instead of judging yourself, because judgment creates shame, I want you to take this time just to create a strategy. Because I already told you, give yourself grace. And now I'm not saying stay the same and give yourself grace. I'm saying create a strategy. If you notice this gap because you do want a change, right? You want to stop holding yourself back. And you may know that you have the skills again, but instead of it, you need just let's start using the skills. Let's and in order to do that, you have to say how you're going to use the skills, right? I can't just tell you use the skills, be more confident. No, let's create a strategy so that you can start using the skills, that self-leadership part of yourself. You can lead from the skills. You can lead from that. You're focusing. That's the part you're operating from, right? Instead of from your weaknesses. So instead of judging the gap, again, like I said, the judgment creates shame. We're going to ask ourselves these questions. You can ask, where am I shrinking? Where am I overcompensating? What am I defaulting to? What older version of myself am I defaulting to? That older version no longer fits who I am becoming. That kind of reflection turns awareness into insight. You can ask yourself those questions. I told you one of the questions I ask myself. I ask myself, what do I need right now? Once the gap is clear, you choose one aligned action, right? So once you see that I thought I couldn't do it, this is what I mean. Because you may not need to ask yourself all those questions to find out that you responded from, I didn't feel like I could do it. I was scared. I didn't want to speak up. I didn't know what to say. All these people are in here are smarter than me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to make myself look stupid. I didn't want to look stupid. Or I don't know what your narrative was, but you don't have to ask these questions to know that that's a limiting belief, right? It's a negative narrative. It's a narrative that didn't fully embrace your capabilities, your abilities, your talents. So once the gap is clear, you choose one aligned action that if reflected, you choose an action that reflects your current capacity. It does not have to be real big. It just have to be um, natural. It has to be something that you truly know is true about yourself. You have to be consistent, right? And so, again, you may not have to ask those questions to know that you showed up less than. When I ask myself, what do I need right now? It's because I've already identified I showed up exhausted. I showed up tired. Remember I said don't make a decision when you're angry. I'm angry. See, that is my indicator that I need to ask myself, what do I need right now to be right for this moment? Do I need to step out for a moment and come back in? Do I need a drink of water? And in that drink of water, it gives me a chance to gather myself, to take a breath and to make sure I'm right, you know? All right. So that's what we're talking about, the plan you're giving yourself, right? To take that break. That's the plan. These are the triggers that shows me that I need to take that break. Like I said, I don't need those questions to know I'm angry. And so that's why I ask myself, what do I need right now? Do I need to take a break? Do I need a drink of water? Do I just need to take a breath? And will I just need a few seconds? How do I ask for it? That's the next question. How you ask for it, right? So leadership is often misunderstood. I told you, by who's the loudest, the volume, dominance, who's the most visible. And many people assume the strongest presence is the room is or the loudest presence is the most powerful person or the most powerful one in the room. But leadership is not defined by how much space you take up. It's not defined by how aligned you are with others, so to say, because of that loudness or that charisma. It makes a difference, though. I'm not saying that it won't make a difference, but I think that how you see yourself, your internal narrative, makes the biggest difference. If you're the loudest and you're the force to be reckoned with, it's because I want it to be because you are so exuberant about what you do and who you become that you're not trying to get attention and to become the center of everyone's attention. You're just being a part of a world, a community where you all are having fun together. And I remember when I was in college and my husband met me, and I've always had this exuberant personality. And I remember always making people laugh. And we would laugh, and my husband would say, but he wasn't my husband at that time. We were just friends. And he would say, are they laughing at you or laughing with you? And I would say, they're laughing with me because I'm having fun. I was really comfortable with myself. I'm very comfortable with telling jokes. I'm comfortable with meeting people, loving people, and just being in the moment with them. So they weren't laughing at me. We were all laughing together. It's great when your jokes land, right? And I love that for me. I love that for everyone. So when I see another person shining, I let them shine. I'll join in and we'll shine together. And then let's light up the room where everyone is having a great time. I want their fire to be ignited, not to be dimmed. And whenever I feel that sometimes I'm doing too much, because there are times when I am doing too much, I know how to self-regulate even during that time. I don't have to know how to self-regulate even when I'm angry. I can self-regulate even when I'm joyous. And when there's a room full of haters and they are uncomfortable because I'm celebrating honest, I feel like it's okay for me to just walk away from them. That's still a type of self-regulation. If it's an unsafe person and it's time for me to shine, I'm not going to dim my shine just because they're uncomfortable. Self-regulating may mean leave that space and go to another one, because dimming my shine will only result in me losing a piece of myself. And that is whatever they're asking is not worth it. So when you manage yourself well, you do influence others without needing to overpower them. You don't need to swing between overcompensating and withdrawing because you feel like you're not enough. Like I said, if I withdraw in self regulation, I'm only withdrawing when I feel like the bully is asking me to give less of myself or to show up less. And I don't want to ever sacrifice a value. I don't want to ever sacrifice my integrity or dignity just so that somebody else can like me. And so if my smile is too much for you, it doesn't mean I stop smiling. It doesn't mean I stop celebrating. It just means I won't do it around you, because that only takes away from the energy you have to give. Remember, you have the rest of the night to enjoy. You have the rest of your life to enjoy. When you manage yourself well, authority becomes less about convincing people and more about consistency over time. You consistently show up strong and you consistently show up for yourself. Leaders do not rely on intensity to command attention. They rely on that stability, on that consistency. And that consistency builds trust far more effectively than forcing can ever do. Confidence is not built through hype, it's not built through excitement or a temporary surge of motivation. Those things can create momentum for a moment, but they don't create consistency. Confidence develops through truly understanding who you are, your ability to self-regulate, and your ability to lead yourself, to lead yourself, to start your thoughts from a place of your strengths, abilities, skills, and talents. Don't lead with your limiting. You're aware of your limiting abilities. Don't worry, you have weaknesses. We all do. But you don't let them lead you. Don't let your weaknesses lead you. Okay? So those things can create momentum, yes. And those things create stability. It grows when your belief, your self-concept, and your actions are consistently supported, right? When those internal drivers are working together. All right, you no longer pulled in different directions when you have that one place, your home base that you come from, right? You got a home base now. You've created a home base. I told you, travel for me really doesn't mean as much because I've traveled from a young age, right? What matters to me is that I can always come home. You always have to be able to come home. You're not pulled here and there when you know you have a home base. You have a steady foundation. It's not about becoming someone entirely new. It's just about being that new version of yourself that you already are and giving yourself permission to walk in it. It's not about abandoning who you are and your past. It's about operating consistently from the level you're capable of reaching. You're closing the gap between your potential and you're closing the gap. And the potential, I mean, that all the skills that you've gained, all your experience, you're closing the gap from how you didn't give yourself permission to show up that way, right? You're going to close that gap. And when you close that gap, you feel confident. So you're closing that gap so you can show up strong and consistent so that you can have consistent results. It's a discipline. And over time, it gets easier and easier to show up as your true self. And I'm not going to tell you that you're going to reach that point and then you won't have something that sets you back. It's just that when you get a setback, because it's natural, it is normal. Life will have ups and downs. When you get a setback, you'll be able to get back on course because you have these skills in place to help you always show up for yourself consistently and always getting those strong results. Thank you so much for joining me in this 3-day challenge. We have unwrapped a lot. And this last session went so long over time. I'd like to apologize. We did start late because I was on live, but it was people couldn't find me. They couldn't get in. And I had a feeling that was what was happening. And so we jumped off and came back on. But it's been a pleasure serving you tonight. I hope that you all really will get the most from this presentation. It's been helpful to share it and to help others grow. Thank you so much and have a good night.